Welcome, everyone. I'm Sumita Batra, and I'll be your host this evening. Many of you already know me from my hosting of the opening night for Sikhlens for the last few years. I am a huge fan and a big supporter. I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Greenwich, England, and raised by Sikh parents that were born in Iran. I grew up migrating between India, England, and Iran and moved to the United States when I was 16. I have over 33 years experience in retail, product development, and branding. In today's COVID environment, I have pivoted and have recently launched the Pro Safety Group and have been busy producing a virtual summit on safety for the beauty industry. I'm also working with a global COVID consortium that is offering COVID test kits, PCR, antigen, and antibody tests to a network of global clients. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Sikhlens, and this year is going to be a little different from our typical film festival because I'm hosting this event virtually. I am reading a lot of script, so I'm hoping not to bore you. Stay with me. I'm going to try to make it as entertaining as I can. I want you to imagine that the red carpet is rolled out and you're all physically in your best Maharaja and Maharani attire. A special welcome tonight to Chapman University, Dean Stephen Galloway. Our keynote speakers this evening, artists Rabindra and Amrit Singh, famously known as the Singh Twins, and our participating filmmakers, artists, authors, and academics who will be participating throughout the weekend. A big welcome also to the new Sikhlens viewers that are watching us around the world. We appreciate you joining us wherever and whenever you can throughout this weekend to watch this program. Before I start, I would also like to thank our Sikhlens donors and sponsors, which make this and all Sikhlens events possible. I'd also like to mention at this point that because many of you may be unaware of the wonderful programs that Sikhlens sponsors, I'll be providing a summary of a few of these programs throughout the evening. I'd like to start by welcoming and introducing Dean Stephen Galloway, the Dean of Dodge College of Film and Media Arts, which just increased its film school ranking to number 4 this year. Stephen Galloway joined Chapman University this year as the Twyla Reed Martin Dean of Film and Media Arts at Dodge College of Film and Media Arts. Dean Galloway is best known for his role as executive editor and producer at The Hollywood Reporter. Galloway graduated from Cambridge University and came to America on the Harkness Fellowship, the British version of the Rhodes Scholarship. After studying at American Film Institute's Conservatory, he worked in film and television both in the US and France before joining The Hollywood Reporter, where he has served for almost 30 years. Over the past decade, Dean Galloway worked to bring in and support diversity in the entertainment industry. Welcome, Dean Stephen Galloway.
Hi everybody, I'm Stephen Galloway and I'm the Dean of Dodge College of Film and Media Arts at Chapman University, and I'd like to welcome you to my office. And when I say welcome you, I'm welcoming myself because this is literally my second week in the office after months away with COVID. Some of you will know I'm very new to this job. I started 6 months ago. I stepped into very big footsteps. Bob Bassett, my predecessor, spent 25 years here and built this school from nothing to being the number 6 ranked film school in the world, according to The Hollywood Reporter, which happens to be where I used to work for 25 years myself. And one of the very first people I met starting this job was the redoubtable Bicky Singh. You all know him. He is a force of nature. I heard about him before I met him. I heard how much he supported our students. I had a lovely lunch with him and I've spoken to him many times since. And thanks to Bicky, and thanks to the Sikh community, we've added to one of the things that's a central mission of mine at Dodge, which is to build diversity. What is diversity? diversity is opening up everybody to different viewpoints. That is the purpose of art, to let us explore deeper things we might not understand. So it's a crucial part of this film school. It's become a critical part of the entertainment community as it moves forward. And so having Vicky and having Sikhlens isn't just a lovely addition, it is fundamental to what we do. You're going to see some of the results of that collaboration. We're going to shoot 5 films shot in France in the summer of 2019 through Project S, which is one of the projects that we have with Vicky and the Sikh community. And this has allowed our students to travel all over the world, exploring the Sikh community in all of its facets. I'm very keen for that to continue, especially with graduates of this film school who really need to learn and have the money to make documentaries. And as we move forward, I want to move in a slightly different direction, which is not just to give money for student filmmakers, but to actually give scholarships that will allow Sikh filmmakers to come through this amazing film school and then go on and have a whole career making films on this subject. In other words, not giving somebody a fish, but teaching them to fish. You'll judge whether this program has succeeded from the films you see. I think they're magnificent. I think they speak incredibly well of what we've been able to do together. I hope we'll all get to meet in person. You are very welcome to come and visit me in my office anytime you like. And in the meantime, I'm leaving you in very good company. So thank you for all your support, and I hope we'll meet soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dean Galloway. I'd like to now introduce our keynote speakers, Rabindra and Amrit Singh, the Singh Twins, with their talk, Art During Lockdown. The Singh Twins will talk about 2 COVID response artworks they created during the COVID-19 lockdown. NHS v COVID, Fighting on 2 Fronts, and Get Your Knee Off Our Necks. The Singh Twins are contemporary British artists with an international reputation whose contribution to art has been recognized at the highest level. In 2010, they were made honorary citizens of their home city of Liverpool. And in 2011, they were awarded an MBE for services to the Indian miniature tradition within contemporary art. They have also received 2 honorary doctorates. In 2015, a Doctor of Fine Arts from the University of Chester for outstanding contribution to British art, and in July this year, a Doctor of Letters from the University of Liverpool. Their award-winning work, which challenges and redefines generally accepted Eurocentric perceptions of heritage and identity in art and society, was cited by Sir Simon Sharma in his BBC documentary series, The Face of Britain, as representing the artistic face of modern Britain.
My name is Aditi Anand, and I'm the head of creative content at the Migration Museum in London. I'm really delighted to be joined in conversation today with the Singh Twins. We're very lucky to have a piece by the Singh Twins in an exhibition we did in 2017, which was called All That I Am. And this summer, when we were planning our exhibition called Heart of the Nation, which is all about migration and the making of the NHS, I found out about the piece that they produced about NHS versus COVID-19 fighting on 2 fronts. And the piece really just encapsulated so beautifully what the exhibition themes were as well, which is all about the kind of underappreciated and overlooked role of Black and minority ethnic people and migrants in producing and sustaining the NHS and what it is today. But I think beyond that, it also asks really deep and challenging questions. So I wanted to start by just kind of asking you how the idea for this piece came about.
Bit of a sad beginning, really, because we lost a good friend of ours who was working in the NHS. So we were quite angered by his, what we saw as really unnecessary death because of the lack of PPI that was being provided to the hospitals by the British government. And so we wanted to do tribute to the NHS, I guess, as much as in his memory as it was kind of praising the kind of great work that the NHS was doing in such difficult circumstances. And just coinciding with that, we happened to have been approached by a TV production company who were making a programme for Channel 4, an arts programme called Grayson's Arts Club. And they were looking to see what artists were doing around the country during lockdown. So we just started this piece, and it really gave us an incentive to make a headway on it in a very short time, because we were actually asked to film ourselves creating the artwork because they weren't allowing film crews, obviously, to come to homes at that time with the lockdown. So it was kind of a double stress in actually trying to create it and film, at the same time. But it did give us that impetus to get the work finished at a time which otherwise wouldn't have been able to do, because lockdown, certain projects came to a grinding halt. So we had other kind of commitments that we couldn't pursue, and that freed up the time to enable us to actually create this work.
And how long did it take actually to bring it all together?
We had to finish it within a week because the production company needed a week to edit, and their program itself was a very quick turnaround, because they were responding to the moment, as it were. But having said that, a week is a very short time for us to create work in any case. But this particular piece is a mixed media digital work, so it draws a lot on some of the painted elements from previous artworks and incorporating that with a lot of new material created digitally within the computer, which it's still quite a time-consuming process, but nothing like the time it would have taken to actually paint this entirely by hand.
So is this the fastest you've done a piece?
Actually, no, I think we did I think we'll talk to you later about another piece, which actually we had to turn around in maybe a couple of days, wasn't it? It was even faster, but yeah, it was a bit of
a precedent that you're setting for yourself.
We're kind of familiar with filming, with painting under pressure, because quite a few years ago we were doing another piece just following Princess Diana's death, and it was a portrait on her. And again, it was coinciding with a company that happened to want to do a profile on us at the time and wanted to follow us working on a piece. So that again was a week turnaround, wasn't it? So we're becoming used to working under extreme pressure.
You spoke a little bit about just all the different aspects of the piece. So maybe just to start, let's talk about that sort of central figure in the piece.
Well, the central figure is actually based on traditional images of St. George, the patron saint of England, which we've interpreted as an Asian nurse from the NHS or National Health Service, and she's slaying the COVID dragon. He was quite appropriate because it's basically a story of a hero, fighting in defence of the defenceless. That's the kind of analogy of St. George figure. And, we felt it was quite appropriate to represent the NHS as this, the knight in shining armour, if you like, coming to the rescue of the people of the country under, really difficult circumstances, and putting themselves in the front line, really, to try and save us from this awful virus.
One thing I kind of noticed in the piece was right below the central image, you have a quote there, and I wanted to find out more about the meaning of that.
It's a quote from the 10th Guru or teacher of the Sikh faith. And it was really the starting point, actually, the inspiration for why we went with the St. George theme and the whole idea of the battlefield, because it talks about life being like a battlefield, and about performing good actions within this life and asking for God to give you the strength to do that, and have the courage to die if necessary, to do the right thing in life. So it was translating that analogy, if you like, to the situation of the COVID virus, and how the NHS are basically fighting on that battlefield and doing good work and sacrificing really their own health and well-being for the sake of others. And the battlefield in this case symbolically is representing the hospitals. And the way we've made that reference is there's a flower growing on the battlefield, which in mythology is associated with the field of medicine. St. George is also very interesting because although he's the patron saint of England, he's actually of Turkish origin, which is quite ironic, really, because he's also the emblem of the far right-wing parties, you know, the National Front and all of those parties, who are usually anti kind of, you know, immigrant and have a very narrow view of who England belongs to. And so with him being of Turkish origin, he fitted in beautifully with the idea of trying to praise, in particular, the BAME communities, the Black, Asian, minority and ethnic communities that work within the NHS system and have always been the backbone of the NHS itself, and have always been the backbone, really, of building countries like Britain. You know, if you go back to the days of empire, you know, it was built on the blood, sweat and tears of foreigners, basically. Yeah. And that's actually represented in the artwork through another detail of Britannia. She sits on the landscape behind the main figure of St. George, reinterpreted as an Asian nurse riding the horse and slaying this dragon, which is made up of COVID viruses.
Yeah, it's such a strong image. And I think you were saying about it kind of exposing some of the hypocrisies is really what makes it so powerful. And I think you do that with quite a few other details in the work as well, you know, that kind of get to the ironies and hypocrisies. So can you talk, I mean, are there a couple of other details that you could talk about along those themes?
It does take a little bit of a dig at the whole Brexit debate that Britain has been through. You know, do we leave Europe or don't we leave Europe? And much of that campaign for the pro-Brexiters was based on the idea that immigrants were, you know, kind of taking jobs and were a drain on the system. So there's a reference within the artwork which actually kind of shows the irony of that perspective, because here you have this Asian nurse on a horse slaying this COVID dragon, and beneath her there's also text which is taken from some of the headlines responding to COVID at the time, many of which talk about how the Black, Asian minority groups are the ones that are at the forefront of fighting this virus because of the numbers that work within the NHS, or the National Health Service, and also the healthcare care worker system as well, outside of the NHS. And they're on the front line, but also they have this added problem, if you like, because the Black, Asian minority communities have been identified as being much more in the high risk factor of contracting this virus than other groups. And so there's another sort of quote in the artwork, which is one of the slogans of the government, which is saying, "In it together," you know, we're all in this together. And really, it has a question mark for us in that it's saying that, well, some of us are actually in it more than others. And it's those very communities which the Brexit campaign were seeking to boot out of Britain by leaving Europe that are the ones that are actually now, you know, putting their necks on the line and showing that they are very much part of Britain and contributing very positively to Britain, as they always have done. Which goes back to the image of St. George as well, really, in a way, because if you're talking about St. George being of Turkish origin, again, it throws in the question of British identity, what it is to be British, or what a lot of people perceive to be Britishness in a very narrow kind of defined white, you know, kind of context. And of course, there are a lot of immigrants who have come to this country that have adopted Britain as their home and feel as British as anybody else who, you know, happen to be born here. So there's also another little piece of irony in the bottom right corner of the artwork, which shows Theresa May as the former Prime Minister of England and Britain, I should say. And she's holding up a placard, which is basically talking about how her government and subsequent governments and previous governments have basically run the NHS into the ground. And I think this COVID virus, I mean, we all, you know, the everyday people knew how important the NHS were, but I think it's really brought home just how invaluable they've been, and the way in which the government has run the NHS into the ground because of, you know, lack of funding, support, and various other factors. And also the lack of care they've shown. I mean, with this whole COVID, the whole COVID crisis, there was a big debate about, you know, inadequate supply of personal protection for the NHS workers. So that's one thing that's featured quite prominently within the artwork. You have the nurse who has this protective visor on her face, but has this huge crack down the middle because, you know, they really were not armed properly for, you know, to defend themselves against this virus. And on the back of the horse, sitting behind her is a small miniature figure of Boris Johnson, who's sort of digging a knife into her back. And it's this idea of the kind of betrayal, I think, the way in which the government has consistently betrayed the NHS by not supporting them in the ways that they should do. And they had a big campaign of clapping for the NHS every Thursday, you know, showing our appreciation and encouraging people literally to come out on their doorsteps and clap for the NHS. And yet they slapped parking fees on NHS staff. There was also a big criticism about the way that governments handled trying to control the virus anyway. And one of the big things that came out very early on was how a lot of people in care homes, many felt unnecessarily died of the virus because the government allowed people coming out of hospitals, you know, required care homes to take them into their care, you know, to relieve stress from the hospitals themselves. And that led to the virus spreading within the care homes. And one of the phrases that came out in light of that was how in an interview was how the care home staff were basically saying that they felt that the people in there had been led like lambs to the slaughter. So we represent that in a symbolic way in the artwork as well, with a lamb that has the portcullis, which is the symbol of the British government. It's like a kind of a gate, which is impaled in the lamb.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's so important because, like you were saying, with the clap for carers and the kind of outpouring of love we've seen for the NHS, sometimes it has this impact of trying to paint NHS workers as heroes, and actually they're, you know, human beings, and they're facing so much uncertainty and, you know, losing friends and family and patients, and it's just there's a much bigger story, and I think that's the artwork does a really good job of kind of making people interrogate that story a bit and get beyond the kind of veneer of just the clap for carers.
Yeah, exactly. It seemed a very shallow gesture, and I think even a lot of people in the NHS felt it was quite a shallow, although appreciative on one sense, because they realised that people were doing it from the heart, the general public. You know, there were certain comments again saying, you know, we don't need claps, we need a pay raise, basically, you know, show some proper appreciation. And that's also represented by a little banner in the artwork, which again was taken from some of the news reports at the time. A lot of the details in this work were based on our research of watching the news, but also, you know, internet research as well, of the kind of comments and responses of people around the country, really. But going back to this idea of, you know, the NHS heroes, which is what they've been dubbed in Britain, again, that ties in really nicely to the symbolism of St. George and the symbolism of the saint in general, because they were really ordinary people that did extraordinary things, and that is exactly what, you know, everybody within the NHS and the care home system have been.
Well, you know, you looked at the sort of relationship in Britain and what's been happening with COVID, but another piece that you created is looking further afield. It's looking at America. So I wanted to just find out more about, again, how did that piece come about, and was that also produced during the COVID lockdown?
Yes, the work, Get Your Knee Off Our Necks, is the title of the piece. There were several influences that came simultaneously, I think. One of them was watching the reports about the parallels, if you like, between the high risk factor in UK being the Black and Asian minority communities, and similarly in America being reported that the Black communities and so-called minority communities are also at high risk, and largely because they are, you know, the deprivation of those communities as being seen as sort of almost second class, if you like, to mainstream communities. And as a result of, you know, poor health and housing and jobs, I guess that has put them in the high risk area. Yeah. So one of the details within this artwork is a virus which has a reference to that. But also it was inspired by, or motivated by, again, news reports on the response to the really tragic murder of George Floyd. And I think, like many people around the globe, you know, we were absolutely horrified by this. I mean, somehow, you know, one hears about racism in America and police violence, particularly against the Black communities. But somehow this event just really dug into everybody. And there were some quotes by celebrities, people like George Clooney, for example, who used the analogy of the virus to explain racism in America, saying that, you know, this is America's virus, and pandemic, and after 400 years we still haven't found a kind of cure for it. And then racism is America's pandemic. That's right. And then you have people like Taylor Swift, who was really criticizing Trump and saying that, you know, he was basically stoking the fires of racism, you know, and white supremacy throughout his whole presidency. So we really wanted to show how racism in America had a historical basis in the whole history of slavery, enslavement of Africans. So the majority of the artwork, a lot of the details around that are looking at figures representing historical slavery and linking that to how the Black communities are treated in America today. So you have Trump, who's represented as this kind of personification of the evils of slavery, basically, and the evils of racism. And he's sitting on this perch or this pillar, which is really, it's called the cornerstone speech, is written on the top of this pillar. And that refers to a speech in 1861 by Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president of the Confederate government, or self-appointed government at that time during the American Civil War, who gave an address called the Cornerstone Speech, really exposing the extent of racism in America, by which he was basically saying that the enslavement of Africans was justified because they were an inferior race compared to the white race. And I think we felt that that's the kind of mindset, this colonial mindset and attitude that has really continued right the way through to modern times. And not just in America. I mean, the artwork, at the base of this pillar, you have a map of the world. So it's also saying that this idea of racist attitudes that is rooted in colonial history is something that is a global problem that needs to be dealt with globally, not just in America itself.
And I think we've seen that with Black Lives Matter movements that kind of started in America, but obviously they have a lot of salience in Britain as well. And it's kind of forced us all to explore some of these things in British history, isn't it? About colonialism and the legacies of slavery that kind of persist to this day. So do you really see that as a kind of, dialogue between countries in this piece?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, systemic racism throughout the world. So I think unless we all come together and recognise it and work together to stamp it out, you know, I think it takes that common effort, if you like, if anything's really going to be achieved in any meaningful way, and not just be another kind of flash in the pan that, you know, for a few years or whatever, it's on the agenda and then suddenly, you know, things go back to the way they were. It needs to really be something that's long term. And I think that can only happen if the whole world basically acknowledge that, one, it exists, and secondly, make real efforts to eradicate it.
And where does this piece and the NHS versus COVID piece, where does it fit into your kind of larger body of work?
It's a continuation really of the project that we've been working on since 2014. It started with a body of work called Slaves of Fashion, that was sparked off by a visit to the Slavery Museum in the French town of Nantes. And during that visit, we saw some textiles that had been produced in India that apparently had been made for the African markets. And initially, we didn't think they were Indian fabrics because they had little motifs of, you know, African huts and palm trees and rhinos, things that you wouldn't associate with Indian motifs at all. And then the curator explained to us that they'd been commissioned by the French during the time where the French colonies were in India to exchange specifically for enslaved Africans. This enabled the French to take part in the transatlantic slave trade. So we were really interested to find out more about India's connection with the slave trade through the trade in these textiles called Indians. And that opened up a whole new door really about how the trade in Indian textiles was linked very much into the global story of empire, colonialism, conflict, slavery, and that led to a body of work which we showed in 2018 at the Walker Art Gallery.
I've noticed that there's a few repeated symbols in some of these works, so it seems to be telling a kind of larger story.
They're individual artworks, but at the same time there is a dialogue between them. So very often we would start a dialogue within one piece through a particular symbol, but then carry on that dialogue within another piece, which would also reference the same symbol, but give more details about the context of the story behind that symbol. So within Get Your Knee of our next, for example, there are a couple of figures within there that represent enslavement in the Caribbean, and then also enslavement in South America during colonial times. And they're figures that have been used in the Slaves of Fashion series in previous works. And there's also a very strong reference to this idea of, the link between enslavement and trade and the kind of commercial lifestyle that we all embrace. So you have a slave ship which is surrounded by cotton plants, which is obviously one of the commodities that were traded during colonial times. The slave plantations depended on this produce. And elsewhere in the painting, you have representation of other cash crops such as tobacco, which were also cultivated through plantation slaves. So the whole image really does bring together those global histories that are common to America, to Europe, to India. And really this piece, although it seems to be a critique of what's happening in America right now, it's really a critique of our shared histories. And it's really our way, we hope, of trying to get people to understand those histories in a much deeper way. And by doing so, hopefully come to a realization that we're all connected in ways that, are very unexpected for most people. And with that realization, perhaps there will be, kind of a new respect in the way that people view people they so-called think of as, immigrants or others or inferior to who they are.
Your work is so, I'm always amazed by how rooted it is in research and this incredible detail. How do you go about researching a series like Slaves of Fashion?
Lots of different sources. It usually starts on the internet to try and, look up, for example, books or documentaries and that kind of thing that we can explore. Libraries, on-site visits, so museums and galleries. So we visit the International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, for example, which has a wealth of material about colonial history and the history of slavery in particular. Diverse sources, really, documentaries. And we really just gather as much information as we can from the start, and then there comes a point where we think, okay, we need to really start, creating the artworks now. As much as we'd like to go on being eternal, students, so we come together and we kind of look at what we found together, and we would identify certain themes. So with the Slaves of Fashion, we identified 11 main themes to begin with. And then we divided those themes between us, and we'd go off independently and hone in on that particular topic, if you like, and try and unearth more kind of information about that. And then as we're creating the works, we've always got our mind on research anyway. So very often we'll come across something midway through a work and we think, oh no, this is just too important to miss out, and we have to somehow find a way of cramming it in because sooner or later we run out of canvas space. So it's sometimes quite challenging because you have to leave out things that you would really love to depict or represent, but the space just isn't there to cram anything else in. And as these two latest works show, the Get Your Knee Off Our Necks and the NHS v COVID, the research never stops. I mean, this is 4 years later after we started the Slaves of Fashion series, and at the time we thought that was it, we've created this body of work and we'll tour it. But since then, actually, even prior to these two works, we've created 2 other large-scale triptych works which tie into the themes of Slaves of Fashion. So it's a really an ongoing progress.
Passion of ours.
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your style kind of lends itself to exploring some of that complexity, isn't it? Because you can include so many little details. And I think probably as visitors, we probably miss quite a few of them, but it keeps intriguing you. You kind of go back to the work and discover something new every time.
Well, we hope it's enough for people to kind of whet the appetite to go out and make their own, research and discoveries. It's just enough to hopefully get people talking about certain themes and debates. Just putting that seed of thought really in people's minds. So if it does that, we don't really mind if we realise people are not going to get everything that we've depicted in the artwork. Some people will recognise certain symbols. Some people won't recognise any symbols. I mean, it's a language. The language of symbolism within art is something that has really not been around for many, many years. I mean, we're inspired very much by Renaissance art, Victorian art, which were heavily, symbolic, and a lot of people in those times would have known, for example, symbolism of the language of flowers, and that's been completely lost in the modern era. So in a way, it's we love to reintroduce that idea of telling narratives through symbols. Yeah,
I mean, you sort of touched on this just now, but I was thinking, we're like obviously living in this time of just heated debates, polarized debates around kind of migration, racism, legacies of slavery. What do you really see as your role as artists?
We both feel it's very much as social, political, cultural commentators. I mean, the art in itself, the style that we work in, people often say is very, obviously, it's very decorative, beautiful style, if I could put it that way. Yeah. And that's part of who we are in terms of our aesthetics and the language that we choose to use. But I think behind every work, there is always a very deep message. And most of the messages that we have in our work are either based on our own experiences of British Asians and that whole cultural debate about dualities of culture and the migrant experience, but also the things that we are interested in and things that fire us up about current politics or ethical trade debates, all of those, or setting history, the record of history straight, giving the other side of the story. So I think art has a very important role to play within that respect. It is a language that's very universal, very accessible, and as a medium, I think it can be a very sort of subtle way also of taking a dig at very hard hitting political concepts and ideas. So we certainly do see ourselves as having a certain degree of responsibility to use our art in ways that are just beyond, creating pretty pictures for, decorative purposes. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but from our own perspective as artists, we're much more interested in using our art as a voice to express how we feel, but also to encourage other people to, engage in really important issues.
Yeah, so we're about to kind of now enter into our second lockdown here in the UK. What are your kind of plans? Do you have any projects to create more work?
Yeah, I guess whilst the galleries and museums are closed, luckily we have a number of private commissions that we're working on to keep us busy, and we have our book for Slaves of Fashion series, which we've started to produce. We need to get that boxed off, before the next exhibition. We're also working on another publication project with a Sikh author who is writing about Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teachings, and he has asked us to illustrate that. So we're going to be quite busy, I think, during the second wave of lockdown. I don't think we're really going to get much of a break, but it's good. It's good to be busy and to have people interested enough to commission us to do work.
Yeah. Do you kind of find yourself kind of pushing against the constraints, or do you feel you're okay with this, that this lockdown is kind of giving you space to do things?
Lockdown has given us more time to be creative, because if we weren't sitting here, the time we're spending creating here might otherwise have been spent traveling, or very often we travel with our work, meetings or events, and none of that has happened, obviously. Yeah. So, and sometimes we have to put the works that we want to do for ourselves on the back boiler because we're busy doing, the kind of commercial work or the projects, the commissions. So with these two particular works, they wouldn't have happened had it not been for, COVID-19 for sure, and being in lockdown, because we had some time freed up from the fact that other projects had come to a standstill. And it's quite nice actually to be able to react spontaneously to events, because very often we're not able to do that because we have, other work commitments, and very often we have to, as I say, put our own ideas to one side and don't get around to them, sometimes years down the line, sometimes never. We've got a big long list of things that we want to do, and have been sitting there in the back of our minds for years and years and years. So it's been nice to actually be able to create spontaneously. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously feeling like everybody, not that suddenly realizing that you don't have the freedom to go and visit friends and family. I think we're all going to or attend arts events. I think we're all going to really relish the day when we're able to do that again. I think we all probably took that all too much for granted before.
Yeah. Well, I think we might stop there. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to kind of touch upon, or
no. I think we've given a summary of what we've been up to. So I think that's hopefully that'll give people an insight into the works. We haven't covered everything, but I think it's always best sometimes to leave something to the viewer to imagine and interpret. Interpret for themselves.
Well, thank you. It's been like an absolute delight to have this conversation with you.
Thanks, Aditi.
We would now like to screen the Destination S film made about the Singh Twins. The Destination S program involves Chapman graduate film students, faculty, and alumni. They provide the domain knowledge to make films successful. In the past, Destination S filmmakers have traveled to various destinations around the world: the UK, India, Canada, Africa, Nepal, Malaysia, and various European locations to make Sikh-themed films. Destination S is now in production in 7 films. You will have the opportunity to watch several Destination S films over the weekend. Now a little bit about the Singh Twins film. Easily told apart by their family, but by almost nobody else, the world-class graphic artists and filmmakers Rabindra and Amrit Singh, who are identical twins, have turned the British art establishment upside down. With unparalleled draftsmanship, the twins bring Mughal Indian influences to their paintings that range from scenes of domestic bliss to highly charged political art. This film brings their delightful personalities to the fore and delves deep into their uncanny similarities as they both work on the same painting simultaneously.
We've grown up with very similar ways of thinking and interests. I think we naturally progressed together. For us, art was all about what inspired you as an individual and also what reflected your own aesthetic interests and tastes. Well, I just came across this diary when I was tidying up, and I haven't seen it for years, actually. Haven't read it for years. The diary that I kept when we went to India back in 1980, yeah. In the winter of 1980, I think.
No, but it took us a month to get there, remember, because we went across land through Europe, so that took at least 4 weeks. I think we probably left in December, and we actually arrived into India, India, around about February.
Yeah, you'll never ever forget it.
I think it's ingrained, don't you?
I mean, it was just like a fantasy world.
Definitely. Growing up, we never really intended to become artists. Art was always something we actually went to school with a view to become doctors. Our father is a GP, and it was something naturally that we wanted to follow in his footsteps.
They tried to get into medical school, but every time they went for an interview, the subject would turn to art, you see. We believe you're very good at art, and so on. So I encouraged anything that they were interested in, I encouraged. So I had this idea that, you know, we must learn as much as we can about India. It's that sort of feeling that I wanted to go back. And I felt that they needed to know a bit about the Indian background. And so the ideal way was, of course, to go by road.
But once we got to India, it was just so amazing. I mean, it was a life-changing experience for us.
When we started the journey, you look at some of the drawings that we did in the book, they're very Christian orientated. As we travelled through into India, the imagery changes from Hindu mythology to Sikh mythology to aspects of Indian history.
And it was then really that we first came across the Indian miniature style of painting, this very ancient tradition that just totally bowled us over. We were amazed by the technical skill, by the sheer decorative, the beauty of the decorative quality, the narrative, the intricate symbolism that's expressed through these works. And we were quite surprised, really, and upset to see that the Indian miniature style had no place within contemporary art in India. I think from that point onwards, we'd more or less found our style, our language, if you like, as artists. We term our work as past modern. It's a specific phrase that we've created, if you like, to describe our work. Just going to get some water, I think.
So basically I think what they wanted was something on the London riots, something political, wasn't it? And they're saying, what was that? London Bridge, World War bombing of London, and linking in the riots as a recent political event.
It was also an expression of the way that we feel we see our work, that we are very much about documenting society around us. We see ourselves as social and political commentators and documenters. So, I mean, there are works like 1984, for example, where we're looking at a specific event where the Indian government attacked the Golden Temple, which is the centre of the Sikh faith, and they sent the army into the temple. It resulted in a lot of loss of innocent lives, something that wasn't broadcast at the time because there was a complete media blackout. So that is something that's very personal to our own hearts, that subject, because immediately we had a reaction to that as coming from the Sikh community. But it was something that we used to broaden the whole debate about political corruption generally. So although the painting focuses on that Golden Temple, there's also other details within that work that point to the fact that this experience happened to the Sikh community, but it's not unique to the Sikh community. So it's important really for us to, whenever we can, is to highlight where the Sikh community fits into the bigger picture. We've always been very determined, I suppose, from day one, that because of the cultural prejudice that we've had towards our work, we should always try and push those boundaries to make sure that our work is always shown on a mainstream platform. So there's various decisions we've made throughout our career. Sometimes they've paid off and sometimes they haven't. For further education, we both went to Liverpool University College, Chester. Indian miniature style was seen as backward and outdated by our tutors. I think there came a point where we felt that compromising our work too much was to lose our integrity, if you like, as artists. The fact that we were so determined to explore the Indian miniature in our work really went against us in the long run, but it did have very serious consequences in that one of the examiners refused to mark a dissertation that we'd handed in as part of the final degree course. Was confided in us eventually that he basically hadn't liked what we'd written about the impact of non-European art forms on Western art. There was a huge debate within the university. The whole issue really became quite public because obviously we wanted to challenge that opinion of his. Eventually, thankfully, we were vindicated. It was found in the end that this particular tutor had no reason or right not to designate a grade for our work. The battle was never really solved because there were ongoing issues, so to this day we don't have our degree.
I'll start at the top then. Where else do you detail? I'm actually going to keep this quite light because I think when you put too thick a layer.
Whilst we were fighting our degree, we felt that we should make effective use of our time, and we had started officially to promote our work as artists.
It's been an uphill battle to get recognition for the work that we've wanted to pursue as artists. But I think in the end it's something that we wouldn't have changed. I mean, it's made us who we are, and it's given us a real sort of focus and aim and purpose in the work that we do as artists. I think without the support of our family, you know, particularly our father and our uncles, who've kind of always been there and said, twins, you know, come on, you've got to fight it, you know, don't kind of let them get the better of you.
When I look back now, how far they've achieved and what they've done, I feel quite blessed.
We've done many works, like All That I Am, for example, which features our father, and he has been a very strong figure in our lives and a great support in our lives, so he features quite a bit in a number of our works.
I thought she was saying all the time, as I'm boasting that all that I am, but I sort of felt a bit embarrassed about it. But she said, no, Daddy, it's not all you are, it's all I am, we are. I think the most beautiful thing, I think, is the fact that their work is being appreciated by our own community now, and the community in general, in the world for that matter, because their paintings are all over the world now.
The director of the Glasgow Gallery of Modern Art commissioned our very first public art piece for the gallery, which is Mr. Singh's India. We were not just exhibiting, but now being part of the formal public collections of British mainstream galleries, and that piece has now found a permanent space in the Kelvin Grove Museum in Glasgow. So we really feel that it has come to represent how our work is now being perceived as part of mainstream documentation of British and Scottish identity and culture. As part of our interest in Sikh memorabilia, we collect anything pertaining to the Sikhs which is printed pre-1930s. One of the main focuses within that is the image of Dalip Singh, who was the son of Ranjit Singh, the founder of the Sikh kingdom in Punjab, who were talking to the Royal Museums of Scotland about a project which will involve us being commissioned to do an artwork around Dalip Singh's life, but also a chance to show the artefacts that they have relating to his life. Okay, so these are the objects for the first time of seeing them.
Mm-hmm.
This is
treasure.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
Which one would you like to?
I think this one. Let's go for the big one first. Okay, so this is a pendant.
Yeah. As far as I have been attached to
a droplet or something there, maybe. And then...
Would you like to open it? Or?
I'd love to. Oh, there's something inside. Okay, personal ornament of gold, emeralds, rubies from Maharaja Dalip Singh's collection. Date at Christie's. And I can't remember what that word is, 1899, but I'm not sure. Christie's, and is it another auction house?
Yeah, maybe they.
So it was
sold
auctioned in
together.
1899.
Yeah, this was one of the auctions. He had a.
I think that idea of valuing our own heritage and feeling that it was just as important, you know, within the world context of culture and heritage as any other culture, really gave us the strength to kind of put our foot down and made us more determined, if you like, to pursue the Indian miniature style and to make it relevant for today, because the idea of Britishness is not what it used to be. It is the multicultural Britain that people often talk about because they've been impacted on by whether it's Indian or Chinese or African cultures. We had quite a conflict when we were told that we'd been awarded an MBE, because the unabbreviated
meaning of MBE is Member of the British Empire. Because a lot of our work is about challenging imperialism and the whole aspect of empire, and particularly because of the historical relationship between Britain and India. And I think the decision in the end to actually accept the MBE was really more about, from being told that the work that you want to do and the style of work that you want to follow is worthless and has no value in contemporary life. From that, moving to, we're giving you this award because of the impact that you've made within contemporary art. It's a huge step. And I think for that reason alone, we were really, well, I guess bowled over to be able to, accept that.
Yeah, I think maybe we overanalyzed the MBE side of things, the interpretation, and we felt, okay, I think just to take it in the spirit in which it was given was the better thing to do.
The MBE was quite a colossal step, I think, to be recognised. I think it's one of the best days of my life, really. I think it's fabulous. It was absolutely, going into that very impressive Buckingham Palace, you stand outside and you look at Buckingham Palace, but actually going inside. The ceremony was absolutely fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic.
It just means that one more artist sees, hopefully, that we've been able to achieve something. It will encourage them to keep going, if you like.
Good afternoon, visitors, and welcome to the Museum of Liverpool. We are delighted to welcome the Singh Twins, who will be in conversation with Dr. Laura McCulloch, Curator of British Arts. The event will include a screening of their award-winning animation, The Making of Liverpool, and an opportunity for book signing.
So today we're sort of going to have this in conversation. I've met the Singh Twins several times now, and their work is absolutely fascinating. And I hope that you really enjoy finding out a bit more about the Singh Twins themselves, how they make their work, how the animation came about. Because Liverpool 800 became an animation, but how on earth did that happen? And was it your idea? Were you approached, and how did you feel about that?
Okay, well, I think we've always had an interest in film and animation, and we've always been really curious about how our work would translate into animation.
Liverpool, we paint with pride your story, so that far and wide, all will know you've come to be Europe's capital, culturally. 800 years displayed for all, beyond the steps of St. George's Hall.
I wanted to kind of go right back to the beginning, and drawing is absolutely essential to your work, but have you always been interested in drawing, and where did that come from?
Well, I think we've always been scribbling on, our father will tell you that we used to scribble on the walls before we used paper. Yeah, no, you
friend of mine was a college brother. I had a he always
But I think if you can make a difference in the world, even if it's just in a small way of changing someone's opinion or bringing them to something that they've never experienced before, I think that's very valuable, and it's very rewarding for us to be able to do that as artists.
The Project S program was launched 10 years ago to address the lack of exposure to Sikhs in mainstream media. Through Project S, Chapman University film students travel abroad to film 5 to 8 Sikh-themed films. Project S is a 2-semester course. The summer semester involves pre-production and on-site filming, and fall semester involves post-production. The courses are taught by Chapman faculty and provide the students with course credit. It is a very unique program. No other university has anything like it. The classes have previously gone to Thailand, Malawi, the UK, and Australia. Last summer, the class traveled to France, where they made 5 films, which will be premiering tonight. Our first Project S film by Chapman Dodge film students this evening is ANMOL. ANMOL is about a young Sikh woman living in France who learns to balance her Western, Punjabi, and Sikh identities. Growing up in the hardscrabble neighborhood of Bobigny, France, ANMOL uses her education in order to create a path for future women of color to follow.
We are part of that generation that has never felt borders in Europe, never truly experienced using a national currency. We only knew Europe, and we cannot imagine life without it.
There is not like one way specific to be successful. Everyone has its own definition of being successful. I will say the most important thing is to be happy and to be comfortable within yourself. My name is ANMOL. I'm 24 years old. I'm French, Indo-French, and I live in Bobigny. Bobigny is a city 10 kilometers far from Paris. It's located in the suburbs. It has a stigma on it of being the hood. La pire école de Paris est toujours mieux que la meilleure école de Seine-Saint-Denis. When you grow up in Bobigny or like cities or areas that have a stigma on it, it is harder. It's a fact. It is harder. When you know it will be harder, you just work harder and you get it. And at the end of the day, I'm happy it was harder because then I actually have something to be proud of. It's due to me, to my motivation, to my hard work, and thanks to the blessings of a lot of people that have come where I am. I was the first one in my family to do higher studies, so it was like a real pride for my parents. It was not easy to do higher studies, as no one in my family done it before.
j'étais une mère toute seule pour élever mes enfants. Donc oui, c'est vrai, il y avait des difficultés, beaucoup. Mais ANMOL, c'est une fille qui, si elle veut faire quelque chose, elle arrive à faire. Donc, je n'ai pas vraiment allé courir derrière elle, aller faire ça, fais ton étude. Elle a débrouillé sa vie tout seule.
Mes parents étaient donc séparés et divorcés et nous avons pris un chemin différent que celui de la communauté sikh. Donc dans ma famille c'est un peu particulier parce que nous sommes donc de culture sikh, de culture punjabi, mais nous ne pratiquons pas la religion sikh comme on devrait la pratiquer d'après les textes sacrés. C'est-à-dire que, vous pouvez le voir, j'ai les cheveux coupés, j'ai les sourcils épilés, et c'est pareil pour ma maman.
Moi, j'avais des difficultés, pas à cause d'ANMOL, mais pour ma vie, en fait, personnelle, que j'avais des difficultés, parce qu'elle a débrouillé tout seule pour ses études et pour toutes les choses qu'elle a fait dans sa vie. Moi, je pense que si un enfant il a des capacités de faire avancer dans sa vie, il ne faut pas empêcher de l'avancer dans leur vie. Il faut l'aider, au contraire, il faut aider et puis encourager. Parce que l'étude, ce n'est pas facile. Hein.
I was not a troublemaking kid. I was always in my dreams, on my clouds. I remember teacher was saying that I was super shy, but always on the clouds, and I was always first in school. So I kind of grew up without any role model because there was no much representation, or people that were what I wanted to be did not look like me or didn't went through the same hurdles like me. There was not so much diversity and representation, or at least brown representation, in the media and on TV shows. It does affect little girls and little boys every day. I had professors and mentors being there for me and saying that they do believe in me, they do see a potential in me, and I should absolutely go for higher studies. I studied in Amsterdam, I studied in Canada, and I studied in Belgium last year. When I studied abroad, people tend to ask me, "Oh, where are you from?" And when I replied, "I'm from Bobigny," they were more like, "No, where are you really from?" It strikes you that you are not considered as a French in your own country. But even outside, people were not considering me as being a French. With time, you just don't care about those people. You just live your life. Alors, ça s'est fait un peu par hasard lors de mon échange à Montréal. Comme vous le savez, au Canada, il y a énormément, en tout cas, il y a une forte communauté sikh. Et donc, j'ai ouvert la boîte de Pandore, si je peux me permettre. Donc, j'ai été dans un temple sikh et ça a été très émouvant et ça m'a ramené beaucoup de souvenirs. D'entendre ces chants, de refaire le rituel de la prière et j'avais pas été depuis 10 ans vraiment et ça a été lors de mes 20 ans à Montréal. Il y a quelque chose qu'il faut différencier, il y a la culture sikh et la culture punjabi. Grosso modo, 98 personnes, des personnes vivant au Punjab sont des personnes de confession sikh. Donc on a tendance à les confondre. La religion sikh, dès le début, a posé dans ses principes l'égalité entre l'homme et la femme. Malgré tout, la culture punjabi, c'est une culture misogyne, où la femme est considérée comme un être inférieur. Et c'est contre ça qu'on doit se battre. Et donc moi, j'ai beaucoup du mal quand des personnes disent que c'est la religion sikh. Non, c'est la culture punjabi que beaucoup de personnes mélangent. Les valeurs sikhs sont très belles, et que ce soit la compassion, la justice, l'humanité, l'égalité, la solidarité. Et on a de la chance, et heureusement qu'elles ne sont pas circonscrites aux Sikhs. J'aimerais que les familles sikhs qui considèrent que justement les hommes seraient supérieurs aux femmes arrêtent de penser comme ça, qui donnent à leurs filles autant de chances. Le respect pour une femme ne devrait pas être en fonction de ses études ou en fonction du métier qu'elle fait. On devrait respecter les femmes, tout comme on devrait respecter les hommes, parce que ce sont des êtres humains. Et souvent on dit, dans la culture punjabi, on dit « Ah mais il faut la respecter, ça pourrait être ta sœur, ça pourrait être ta mère, ça pourrait être voilà, ta fille. » Mais avant tout, c'est une femme, enfin, c'est un être humain. J'espère que les prochaines générations, notre génération, va pouvoir changer cela, va pouvoir justement mettre fin à ces inégalités qu'il y a dans la religion sikh, dans la culture punjabi. Donc moi je me considère sikh, de confession sikh. J'ai grandi avec cette identité-là. Je la conçois, mais je ne suis pas que sikh, je suis français, je suis d'origine indienne, je suis de confession sikh, mais aucune de ces identités ne me résume à elle seule. Toutes ces identités, si on enlevait une de ces identités, ma personnalité, ou en tout cas mon identité, serait incomplète.
The Sikhlens Digital Voices Program, SDVP, is a training program for Sikh youth to learn filmmaking. It was launched in 2014 with the help of Chapman University's Dodge College of Film and Media Arts and in partnership with the Sri Hemkund Foundation. For the first 5 years, Sikhlens and the Sri Hemkund Foundation have trained Sikh children in the Gurdwaras of California, New Jersey, and London. These workshops have trained over 1,000 children from ages 6 to 18 and have resulted in the production of over 125 short films. Sikhlens has now expanded its training program, SDVP, to San Antonio, Seattle, Tampa, and New Delhi. Our program consists of a 2-day in-person training, 3 to 4 hours each day, Physical workshops are supplemented by online workshops at Khan Academy. Our trainers are graduates of leading film schools who donate their services to our program. This year, due to the pandemic, the program is being executed virtually. Contact Sikhlens if you're interested in this program for your community. And now, for our next Project S film, Becoming Atma. Becoming Atma tells the story of Atma Singh, a French man who was raised Catholic and converted to Sikhism. Atma defines his own identity by being a businessman, a yogi, a father, and much more. Please enjoy Becoming Atma.
Best tea. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonjour. In French, there is a concept of very important liberté de conscience. You must be free with your own consciousness. Spirituality is everywhere, in everybody. Nature, of course, is a creation of God. So, when you are in nature, you feel like connected to something and to yourself. I come from a Catholic family, and my name is Olivier. Part of my family now call me Atma, and part of my family they still call me Olivier. Atma means soul. We started to read the Japji Sahib in a little book. It was the first time, and so I was really kind of struck by the power. It was the scripture I was waiting for a long time, you know. And I even didn't know that I was waiting for something. Honestly, I am not inspired by the Catholic religion. So it was not my religion, the religion of my parents. Big question mark in myself. Shall I pursue in that new religion, this new practice, or stop, you know? My father responded very positively. My mother was more like skeptical, or it took many years to swallow it, I would say. But my father is a real Catholic. He practices. He goes to the church every Sunday. So for him, being spiritual is something great. My wife first came to this yoga festival in 90 or 91, I don't remember. It's really intense meditation for 3 days. So it's like a reset of your brain, you know, for 1 year, you know. So yeah, and you clean your subconscious, you know, and your emotions. So this is a picture of my wife, my daughter and myself at Golden Temple. My wife inspired me to go to yoga, and in fact I was just following my wife in her activity. I did my own, it was my own path, and herself, she became a Sikh at the same time as me. We used to go in mountain on our own for jog, you know, training, and so she did not come back, and we went to that valley. It was with a car. We saw her car, and we find her body. She was under a cliff, and with a big hematome. Is that an English word? Blood? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was a rock coming from the cliff above. Yeah. And my daughter was 9 years old. Yeah. She looks like my wife. Yeah. She's blonde with blue eyes like my wife. We have in total 19 medicinal tea. The little laboratory when with all the ingredients, and we did all the formula. So producing the 20,000 tea bags per day is a full-time job. In my company we just do things very consciously, put the value in before the business aspect. I end up to do a medicinal tea, even if I am French and from the country of the baguette and the cheese and the wine and the Bordeaux. Yeah. At the end of the blend, I just say a mantra, a Shabbat from the Sikh religion, just to put my energy in the blend.
viens me dire bonjour.
But being spiritual doesn't make any change in your personality because, in fact, everybody is spiritual. God is everywhere. So this is the beauty of this religion, you know. So it's not a religion, it's a lifestyle about balancing it. Your identity is always the projection of the people they have on you, you know. And so sometimes the projection they have on you, you don't like it. So it's the same thing. Every morning you tie your turban and you are creating a projection on yourself. I would say that I am a sportsman, a businessman, and a Sikh in free world. Yeah. Did I answer to your question?
Sikhlens recently acquired over $250,000 of state-of-the-art filmmaking equipment. The purpose of the grant is to loan equipment to film students in the United States for 2 to 3 weeks. The only stipulation is that the student must create Sikh-centric films. Again, contact Sikhlens if you're interested in this program. Our next Project S film, UPROOTED, tells the story of one Sikh family who fled Punjab for France after the attacks of 1984. Years later, the country they once found solace in has enacted a turban ban, which forces the family to fight for the right to express their Sikh identity. Enjoy UPROOTED.
अच्छा ओ ना ਛੇਤੀ ਵੱਡਾ ਕਰ ਦੋ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਨੰਗਾ ਤੇ ਚੈੱਕ ਕੀਤੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਮਮਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਿੰਟ ਤੂੰ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੀ ਆ ਖੜ ਜਾ ਅਜੇ ਔਖਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਿਆ
ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਸੀ ਵੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਹਾਲਾਤ ਇੰਨੇ ਖਰਾਬ ਹੋ ਜਾਣਗੇ
ਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਕਮੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ, ਸਾਡੇ ਗੁਰੂਆਂ ਪੀਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਧਰਤੀ ਆ ਉਹ, ਤੇ ਪਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਸਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਹੁਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਆ, ਸਾਡੀ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਆ।
I think it was a dream for him to open a restaurant and share this culture in food.
ਤੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਪਿੱਛਾ ਨਾ ਭੁੱਲੋ, ਅਸੀਂ ਕੌਣ ਆ ਤੇ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਆਏ ਆ।
ਉਸ ਦੀ ਦੇਣ ਆ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੀ, ਤੇ ਸਾਥ ਆ ਮੇਰੀ ਵਾਈਫ ਦਾ, ਜਿਹਨੇ ਸਾਰੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਹਰ ਦੁੱਖ ਤੇ ਸੁੱਖ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਸਾਥ ਦਿੱਤਾ।
ਮਾਂ ਬਾਪ ਤੋਂ ਜੋ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਮਿਲੀ, ਧੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜੋ ਮਾਂ ਬਾਪ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ, ਮਤਲਬ ਪੇਕੇ ਘਰ ਤੇ ਸਹੁਰੇ ਘਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਫਰਕ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ।
Now in France, if you're a Sikh, you cannot wear a turban.
President Chirac announced on Wednesday that the wearing of overt symbols of religious allegiance would be banned from state schools.
We have to wear a turban, we have to wear the 5 kakars, and here we can't wear it.
It was the president like Jacques Chirac who made this law. We can ban this, the turban.
ਕੋਈ ID ਕਾਰਡ, ਡਰਾਈਵਿੰਗ ਲਾਇਸੈਂਸ, ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਤੇ ਪੱਗ ਨਾਲ ਫੋਟੋ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਾ ਸਕਦੇ।
Like the principals came and said like you can wear that now.
How can it be like unrespectful because we don't do anything, like we just putting this on our head?
I think in France it's about the culture.
Yeah.
They're like if you have something in you like have, then you are not respectful.
ਸਾਨੂੰ ਚੰਗਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗਦਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮਤਲਬ ਇੱਕ ਪੱਗ ਲਾ ਕੇ ਰੱਖਣੀ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਲੁਹਾਵੇ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਬਹੁਤ ਛੋਟਾ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਕਿ ਆਪਣੀ ਬੇਇੱਜ਼ਤੀ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ।
ਜਦੋਂ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ ਤਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਖ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਮੈਂ ਕੋਈ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ, ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਤੋਂ ਵਰਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਰਫ ਫਰਾਂਸ ਹੀ ਆ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਪਗੜੀ ਦੀ ਮਨਾਹੀ ਆ।
I think it was French people who want this. They are afraid of like the image that we give, not just for the Sikhs, but for the Muslims too.
Yeah. She's a Muslim, he's a terrorist.
Yeah, they live with cliches. So cliches. Yeah.
मन्ने पावे मुख द्वार मन्ने परवार सरदार मन्ने तरे तरे गुर सिख मन्ने नानक भगन बिख ऐसा नाम निरंजन होए जे को मन जाने मन कोए। पंच परवान पंच प्रधान पंचे पावे दुर्गा मान सुहर दर जान पंचा का गुर एक ध्यान।
Given these religious songs, we feel peaceful when we listen. There we have lots of gurudwaras, so we can just go there in different gurudwaras in many different cities. It's very difficult because the atmosphere that we have in gurudwaras, this is special for us, even if we have to do seva, so service of everyone, people, food and everything, we can't do here.
I had like long hair and then a girl just came in, my classmate, it was in primary school, and she came with a scissor and she cut my hair.
4 and 5 boys.
Yeah, they were around him to like, now open your hair, we want to see.
Push me and kick me, and I said, stop it, I'm gonna react, and I react. First day of the school, I got and the director come to me and say you can't wear this. The next day, I go with a little turban again. I say to him, I can't remove this. This is my religion.
ਜੇ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟ ਤੇ ਜਾਈਏ ਫਿਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਪਰੇਸ਼ਾਨੀ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਤੇ ਪਿਕਚਰ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹ ਬਗੈਰ ਪਗੜੀ ਤੋਂ ਆ, ਤੇ ਏਅਰਪੋਰਟ ਤੇ ਪਗੜੀ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਈਏ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਪੁੱਛਤਾਛ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਹਮਣਾ ਕਰਨਾ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ।
When I wear a turban, like
I feel
have
like
my
queen.
yeah, I feel like a princess. I know that I have my identity.
ਪਗੜੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਤਾਜ ਆ।
ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਗਏ, ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਲਾਈਫ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤੀ ਤੇ ਬੜਾ ਕੁਝ ਦੇਖਿਆ। ਬਸ ਹੌਲੀ ਹੌਲੀ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਹਮਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੀ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ, ਆਪਣੀ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਦੂਸਰੀ ਕੰਟਰੀ 'ਚ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਨੋਰਮਲ ਹੈ। ਤੇ ਜਣੇ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਜਣਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਸਾਥ ਵੀ ਹੋਣਾ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਦੀ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਹੋਵੇ ਕਿ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਉਤਸ਼ਾਹ ਮਿਲ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਹਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਖੜਾ। ਤੇ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਫਿਰ ਇੰਝ ਚੱਲਦੀ ਆ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਜਣੇ ਬੜੇ ਖੁਸ਼ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਮਿਹਨਤ ਕਰੋ ਤੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਵਾਲੇ ਦਾ ਨਾਂ ਲਓ ਤੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਦਸਾਂ ਨੌਂ ਦੀ ਕਮਾਈ ਕਰੋ ਤੇ ਵੰਡ ਕੇ ਛਕੋ, ਜੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਦੇਵ ਜੀ ਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਿਆ।
For the last couple of years, we have been sponsoring abbreviated versions of our premier Southern California Film Festival at venues across the US and the world. These shorter festivals, called Sikhlens in a box, usually run from a couple of hours to half a day or even one full day. The remote location handles the logistics of booking a theater and inviting the local community, and we provide everything else. We have a large catalog of Sikh films they can choose from. We also help with the marketing. We then fly our team to the location to serve as projectionists and filmmakers when available, so they can have a Hollywood-style Q&A session during the screenings. We have had these festivals already in Seattle, Bellevue, UC Davis, San Antonio, Princeton, Tampa, Chicago, New York City, London, and Chandigarh. This year, we are running these festivals as 2-hour programs across the United States. This option is even easier to host, so please contact Sikhlens if you're interested. Our next film, turBAN. Ranjit Singh, a lawyer and activist, fights against a French law that bans the wearing of religious symbols in public schools and government buildings. As a result of the ban, Sikh men and women have been forced to choose between their faith and education and employment. Enjoy turBAN.
Je pense que l'école est laïque, et du moment qu'elle est laïque, il n'y a aucun besoin d'avoir ni des voiles, ni des kippas, ni rien du tout. Je pense qu'elle est laïque, et c'est ça. Ceux qui veulent porter le voile, il faut ou bien des écoles pour eux, ou bien, malheureusement, qu'ils retournent dans leur pays. Parce que si nous allons dans les pays, par exemple, allez-y, et mettez-vous en mini-jupe ou en short.
Je vais donc mettre aux voix l'ensemble du projet de loi relatif à l'application du principe de laïcité dans les écoles, collèges et lycées publics. Le projet de loi a été adopté.
Changer la loi! Il va changer la loi!
Strict imposition of the ban on the wearing of religious symbols in public schools continues in France.
Aujourd'hui, on demande à la Cour pour que l'Éducation nationale tranche sur notre cas parce qu'ils nous disent d'attendre, qu'ils font faire quelque chose.
Attend depuis dans une zone, une espèce de flou juridique qui ne peut pas durer. Non, on est des citoyens comme les autres, ces jeunes sont français, ils sont nés en France.
Cette histoire aurait dû être réglée en 2004, mais à l'époque, nos aïeux étaient la première génération. Ils n'étaient pas encore très bien, ils ne savaient pas parler français très bien, donc ils ne pouvaient pas gérer ce dossier. Mais depuis notre génération, c'est la première génération qui est née ici, qui a étudié ici. Et petit à petit, on essaye d'avoir des réunions avec les ministères, avec des parlementaires, avec les maires, pour faire savoir qui sont les Sikhs. Je pense qu'il y aura une première partie où il faudra faire savoir à tous les Français qui sont les Sikhs.
ਇੱਥੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਕੋਰਟ 'ਚ ਉਹਦੀ ਲਲਾਮੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਐਵੇਂ ਹੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਗਿਆ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਜਦੋਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਐਂਟਰ ਹੋਏ, ਮੈਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠਾ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜੱਜ ਸੀ, ਜਿਹੜੇ 2-4 ਬੈਚ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਤੂੰ ਬਾਹਰ ਹੋ ਜਾ ਜਾਂ ਨੰਗਾ ਸਿਰ ਕਰਕੇ ਆ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤੂੰ ਅੰਦਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਹਿ ਸਕਦਾ। ਲੇਕਿਨ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇੱਕ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਉਹ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਥੇ ਖਤਮ ਆ। ਕਿਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਰਸਤੇ 'ਚ ਕਿਤੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਚੈੱਕ ਕਰੇ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਫੋਟੋ ਆ ਉਹ ਨੰਗੇ ਸਿਰ ਆ। ਜੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵਾਲਾ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ 'ਤੇ ਬਜਿੱਦ ਹੋਵੇ ਕਿ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਸ਼ਕਲ ਵਿਖਾ ਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪੱਗ ਲਾਉਣੀ ਪਏਗੀ, ਕਿੱਡੀ ਵੱਡੀ ਸ਼ਰਮ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ। ਅਸੀਂ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ 2004 ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਅੱਜ ਤੱਕ ਸਾਡੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਸਿਰਫ ਪੰਜਾਬ, ਦਿੱਲੀ ਜਾਂ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਸਿਰਫ ਇੱਕ ਬਿਆਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਤੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਨਾਂ ਵਰਤ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿਤੇ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਆਉਂਦੇ।
Narendra Modi is set to become India's next Prime Minister.
It's yet another diplomatic victory for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. French ambassador to India, François Richier, has said that France is willing to accommodate turban Sikh students in private schools.
Sikh community leaders are hopeful but also wary. They say similar promises have been made before.
The ban on the wearing of religious symbols in public schools continues in France.
Well, if Sikhs cannot get pictured for official photographs, well, that means they are not entitled to passports, driving licenses and other government IDs.
Le directeur nous a mis à l'écart et il m'a dit que je ne serais pas accepté à l'école. Alors que j'étais déjà accepté l'année dernière, donc les raisons c'est par rapport au règlement intérieur qui interdit tous les couvre-chefs. L'année dernière j'allais toujours avec mon turban, donc ça ne posait pas de problème. C'était assez bizarre pour moi.
Ça fait bizarre de revenir sur le parvis du lycée Louis Michel, de savoir qu'il y a encore des barrières énormes, que encore aujourd'hui, moi, je ne pourrais pas poursuivre mon éducation dans cette école parce que je porte un turban. Une fois que tout le monde est rentré en classe, nous, on a le droit de venir. Donc on était vraiment discriminés, on n'avait pas le droit déjà d'être avec nos amis. On ne sortait pas de la maison ensemble, mes amis partaient plus tôt et moi, je venais après. On dit, voilà, toi, ton identité dérange, toi, ton turban pose un problème. Allez. याद है किस तरह गल बीती सी किदां सिखां नूं मुश्किलां आईयां सी 2004 ਵਿੱਚ
2004 ਦੀ ਮੁਸ਼ਕਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਈ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ 1982 ਵਿੱਚ ਐਲੀਜੀਬਲ ਸੀਗਾ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਤੇ ਆਇਡੈਂਟੀ ਕਾਰਡ ਲੈਣ ਦਾ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨੈਸ਼ਨੈਲਿਟੀ ਮਿਲ ਗਈ ਸੀ। ਉਹਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਫੋਟੋ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਟਰਬਨ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ, ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਰਿਫਿਊਜ਼ ਕਰ ਕੋਈ 1 ਸਾਲ 1 ਮਹੀਨਾ ਮੈਂ ਬਿਨਾਂ ਪੇਪਰਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਰਿਹਾ। ਨੈਸ਼ਨੈਲਿਟੀ ਸਰਟੀਫਿਕੇਟ ਮੇਰੇ ਪਾਸ ਸੀਗਾ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਆਇਡੈਂਟੀ ਕਾਰਡ ਤੇ ਪਾਸਪੋਰਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀਗਾ। ਹੁਣ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਪਲੇਸ ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਪੱਗ ਲਾਏਗਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਬੰਨਣ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ 10 ਮਿੰਟ ਲੱਗਣੇ ਸੀ, ਇਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੰਨ੍ਹਣੀ ਲਾਏਗਾ ਨਹੀਂ, ਪੱਥੋਂ ਪਾਈ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਤੇ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਪਰੇਸ਼ਾਨੀ ਹੋਏਗੀ। ਤੇ ਇਹ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਟਰਬਨ ਹੈ ਪਾਰਟ ਆਫ ਬੋਡੀ ਹੈ, ਇੱਕ ਸਰੀਰ ਦਾ ਅੰਗ ਆ, ਇਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੇ ਲਾਉਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ। ਸਾਡੇ ਵੀ ਬੱਚੇ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਇਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਮਾਈਗ੍ਰੇਟ ਹੋਏ ਸੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ। ਇਹ ਕਾਰਨ ਮੇਨ ਇਹ ਸੀਗਾ ਵੀ ਬੱਚੇ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਸਕੋਪ ਨਹੀਂ, ਕੋਈ ਫਿਊਚਰ ਨਹੀਂ। This reason we are not king, we are beggar here in class.
Nous avons également, que ce soit la Première Guerre mondiale ou la Seconde Guerre mondiale, la Première Guerre mondiale, de nombreux soldats sikhs qui étaient venus à travers l'Empire britannique, mais aussi à travers des empires sikhs, de Maharaja, de Patiala ou de Kapurthala, qui avaient envoyé des régiments spécifiquement en France parce qu'ils étaient francophiles. Ils aimaient la France. Et au cours de la Seconde Guerre mondiale, c'est surtout des Sikhs qui étaient soit américains, soit canadiens, soit britanniques, qui ont combattu sur le territoire français.
Quand j'étais petit, je voulais être à l'armée, je voulais être colonel en fait. C'est vraiment triste d'en arriver là, de dire que mon pays ne m'accepte pas tel qu'il est. Je trouve que la France a perdu un bon colonel.
Ce qu'ils faisaient, même s'ils ne savaient pas ce qu'ils faisaient, hein. Ils arrivaient par derrière et nous tiraient les cheveux. Et ils nous traitaient de tous les noms, ils disaient que c'était des filles. Vos vestiaires ne sont pas là quand on faisait du sport, parce que c'était vestiaire fille, vestiaire garçon. Donc il y a un moment où on se disait, mais attends, pourquoi je suis un garçon? Et souvent on me dit que oui, t'as des cheveux longs, t'es une fille, alors que non. C'était de l'harcèlement en fait. C'est de l'harcèlement dans l'ignorance.
C'est leur pièce. Ah, c'est pas le contraire, il prend du tout. Le moto, il fait comme il veut. Tu sais quoi? Il veut juste savoir. Non, mais juste, comment ça se passe? Vous pensez que dehors, les Français, vous pensez comme des Français, vous? Non. Soit disant étrangers, mais ils veulent pas nous le dire. Les étrangers, genre, ils nous reconnaissent grâce à une couleur de peau ou à l'accent. Et tu penses parce qu'à cause de ta peau, ils ne pas pour un Français? Ah, ouais. Ils disent les Français, c'est les blancs, yeux bleus. Comme il y a de des clichés, quoi. Ouais, voilà. Et pour vous, c'est ça être français, c'est quoi? Non, être français, déjà, c'est être français, c'est la nationalité. Et vis-à-vis des gens qui vous regardent, on vous regarde bizarre, on vous regarde. Ils m'ont regardé mal, ils étaient même jaloux.
C'est le quartier, même en cours. Ils vont te tailler.
Le racisme,
si tu te laisses faire, ils vont te banner encore. Ils vont te pétiner. Si tu te défends, bah c'est différent.
Moi je connais quelqu'un. Mais comment tu te défends en fait? Violent? Il n'y a pas une autre manière pour être plus
non, plus il faut que tu montres ton caractère en fait. Si tu montres que ouais, t'es là, s'ils te bannent, bah voilà.
Est-ce que vous pensez que si les gens savaient ce qu'est les Sikhs, ils vous respecteraient ou
oui,
un peu plus de moi? Là ils savent pas qu'en fait pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale on les a aidés à libérer la France pendant le régime des Vichy. Là ils savent pas. Les nouvelles générations ils savent pas. Les anciennes ils savent un petit peu. Là comme l'a dit Varane, après nous dans notre classe il y avait des Arabes, il y avait toutes les religions. C'était plus les années de nos frères ou quelqu'un d'autre, nos parents. Là il y avait beaucoup de discrimination, ils regardaient mal, des regards violents, furieux, enragés. Malgré la grande histoire qu'il y a entre la France et les Sikhs, il y avait une carence, un écart considérable entre ce que nous pensions et ce que les Français savent. Autant maîtriser ces thématiques et à l'avenir, dès qu'un sujet, vous savez de vous connaissez le sujet.
Il y a un problème en France, c'est qu'en fait ils se sont bâtis une image d'un Français. C'est-à-dire, ils ont une image cliché qui devrait en fait, dont ils devraient se débarrasser et essayer de s'ouvrir plus aux autres cultures, mais voir comment nous on participe en fait à la vie générale en France. C'est-à-dire comment on vit dans les écoles, dans les bureaux, dans la vie en général, mais en France en fait.
Et du coup, beaucoup de jeunes à l'époque, en 2004, on s'est organisés. Et on a mis en place un site web, on a mis en place des conférences, des séminaires et des activités à travers des festivals pour partager aux Français, au niveau local mais aussi au niveau national, la culture sikh. Pour certains, le turban est un fait culturel. Pour d'autres, ça fait partie de leur identité. Par exemple, pour moi, ça fait partie de mon identité.
Je veux continuer à porter mon turban, je veux continuer à garder cette tradition que mes anciens m'ont transmise, tout en restant en France, tout en restant français.
Sikhlens Scholar Program assists aspiring filmmakers with counseling and admission into film schools, as well as providing them with financial and moral support. Although most students come to us as they are ready to enter film school, we try to encourage younger students through the Sikhlens Digital Voice Program, SDVP. In recent years, we have helped over a dozen students. We are creating an ecosystem of Sikh scholars to make our community aware of the opportunities in filmmaking and other creative arts. Sikhlens has also provided funding to filmmakers in India. Our last film for the evening is The Sardar of Conde Souvier. Son of the former chief of the Indian Army, Vivek Singh is the first elected Sikh in France. He integrates into French culture, being the only Sardar Sikh man in his town, Conde Souvier. His integration was not easy, but he eventually learns to thrive in Normandy. Enjoy The Sardar of Conde Souvier. After this film, we will be hosting a Q&A, so please stick around.
So I start with who am I, where I was born, and etc. Okay. Okay, so I look at you. So my name is Vivek Pal Singh. I'm a Christmas baby, born 24th night, 12.5 in Maharashtra, South India. Since I'm born, I've heard about France. So I said, hey.
Madame, monsieur, nous vous informons que ce vol est non fumeur. Les démonstrations de sécurité vont vous être représentées. Veuillez retirer vos écouteurs.
So I came here 20 years ago as a student. I reached Paris airport not speaking a word of French. The campus had about 200 students basking in the sun. In comes this Sardar and these bags and walking towards the main hall. I would walk 10 steps, put my bags. Walk 10 steps, put my bags. They were so heavy. Not one came to help me. Not one student.
Here we have a fine-looking Hindu trying to attract our attention by a few simpler tricks. The bag seems to be empty, all right, doesn't it?
Before their art war, they were confused. They thought I was a magician.
And yet he draws an egg out of it.
Children would come up to me and say, hey, Aladdin is here, and then kids would stop in the tracks and scream, Aladdin, Aladdin. That's what I used to go through, and that's pretty positive.
My father was the governor
of Arunachal Pradesh.
I don't know if you realize, your father is the governor of a state. He is like the president of a state. His house is like a palace, 100 people working for him. And people are saying, what's wrong with you? People would say, you are a governor's son. Go enjoy life. People will die for you. And I'm here washing dishes and trying to earn my life. Nothing identifies. You don't identify yourself with anything that's happening around you.
When you go to watch a football game is 30,000 people in a stadium. Now you get all categories, all kind of people. Sitting there with the turban, I'll be very honest. Out of 30,000, I was the only turban guy sitting there. Now, when you're sitting and watching a football match, somebody screams from behind you, Osama bin Laden. I got up, I looked behind. Then everybody around me turned and looked at me. The next football match, I printed a small one-page thing about the Sikhs and I put them on each bench. After that, I didn't get a single insult.
So you have the whole family, chin chin, and we the Sikhs say balle balle.
Galette mentale, j'en ai 2.
Cheese.
Cheese. Voilà, c'est mental, hein. Alors 5 complets. J'en ai 3 complets de tomates. Je sais parce que c'est bouillant.
Either you are a spectator or you are a participant. So either I was just a spectator of what's happening around me, accepting my society, where I live, where I send my children to school, to be ignorant and me change for that society. Or I make them understand to change the mindsets of the people around me. I joined the French politics.
ਸਾਬਕਾ ਫੌਜ ਮੁਖੀ ਜਨਰਲ ਜੇ ਸਿੰਘ ਦਾ ਪੁੱਤਰ ਵਿਵੇਕਪਾਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਫਰਾਂਸ ਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ ਦਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਚੁਣਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਸਿੱਖ ਮਿਊਨਿਸਪਲ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨਰ ਬਣ ਗਿਆ। ਫਰਾਂਸ ਦੇ ਸਫੀਰ ਫ੍ਰੈਂਕੋਇਸ ਰਿਵੀਅਰ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਕ ਮਾਰਚ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਬਕਾ ਫੌਜ ਮੁਖੀ ਜਨਰਲ
I'm married to a French Viking girl, blonde, blue eyes, tall, the character that goes with it. She's the reason why I'm here and the reason I stayed. My marriage was a catastrophe. The day we got married, the mayor booked another marriage of a local girl, gave her the hall and married me in a small room. My family couldn't fit. My family had come from India. They were looking at me and saying, "What is this?" Then when he's pronouncing my names, he didn't practice. He didn't even ask me how my name was pronounced. So we call it Singh. If you remove the H here, they call it Sanj. Sanj means monkey. So that's what he's saying in the video of my marriage is Vivek Sanj, Vivek monkey marrying to Atma Singh. I have some tears coming because those are difficult moments in life. But that's one man. I can't blame the village for one man's attitude. It makes no sense. France is not an easy place. Not only do you have to learn French, but you have to literally become French. It's just a question of perspective. Is the fact that you are a lone Sardar lost? Deciding whether you have to cut your beard or you don't have to cut your beard, or should you cut your hair or not cut your hair, because everybody around you is making you look different. That is your strength. Make that your strength. If you make that your strength, that will help you throughout your life, because you will change environment for you and not the vice versa. She's the reason why I'm here. Yes, we get hurt, yes, we get insults, but make it your point that they love you. That you, for them, you are the most exotic kind of piece they can get. Anyway, that's how it is. Any other question?
Merci de votre attention. Thank you for your attention.
And now, 3 of the Project S filmmakers that filmed the films you just saw are joining us for a Q&A. Haley Bantle graduated with a BFA in News and Documentary from Chapman University. Haley hopes to take her experience and break into the television editing world. Haley recently finished 2 documentaries, one being her thesis project and the other made with a competitive grant. She is now working for Ugly Brothers Studio as a production assistant. Gianna Gravalis is a 2020 graduate from Chapman University with a BFA in News and Documentary and minor in Media, Culture and Society. Throughout her student career, she worked as a producer and anchor for Chapman News and a director, producer, editor for some short audio documentaries. Her documentary work spanned anywhere from her hometown to Asia and Europe. Gianna is currently a lifestyle television reporter in Boston. Rishabh Tucker has successfully led documentary films and projects in India, France, and USA. A graduate of Chapman University with an MFA in documentary filmmaking, he believes audiences around the world connect through one thing: emotions. He is driven by his passion for inducing emotions in the audience through the audiovisual medium and guided by quality direction. Gianna, what appealed to you as a filmmaker about the story of Atma?
I actually found Atma by doing a Google search of Sikh Indians in France, and deep in the depths of the Google pages, I found his website for Yogi Tea. Atma immediately jumped out to me as a subject because he was a Frenchman and a Sikh, a business owner. I saw that he dabbled in yoga. He had so many different layers to him as a person that I figured he would be perfect for a film so that we could kind of dive into each one of his identities and figure out what they all meant and how they tied together.
Did Atma drive the story of the film, or did you as a filmmaker suggest the storyline filming sequence?
So I would say that we as the filmmakers definitely drove the storyline, but Atma had a lot to bring to the table because he was such an interesting man. And as a businessman, he had a little bit of a director sense as well, you know, giving his own suggestions and recommendations on what he thought that we should film. So it actually proposed a little bit of a challenge where we were trying to find a balance between Atma not necessarily directing his own film and how we could kind of take his recommendations into consideration and finding that balance. So it was a little bit of both, but I would say that we definitely kept the storyline going, but he had a lot of layers to uncover. So he definitely helped us guide us in the direction of new things, new ideas to be filmed.
Haley, the film has beautiful scenery. Did you plan that, or did Atma suggest the locations?
We did a lot of location scouting through Google Maps since we knew we would be in a beautiful area. But Atma took us to one of his favorite spots up in the Alps with this lake that was tucked into the hills. And it was definitely a place that we wouldn't have found on our own. And also thanks to Nikki Perwall for being the greatest cinematographer ever.
What were the most enjoyable parts of making this film for you?
Making this film really tested our limits as a team and helped us all push each other harder, whether it was filming techniques or trying to figure out how to lug all of our equipment we had up into the Alps, where some parts were vertical slopes and we were basically rock climbing. But I really enjoyed watching us all grow as filmmakers and strong-willed women.
Gianna, why did your team choose this subject for a film?
Funny story about how we chose this family for subjects. When we got in touch with Atma for our other film, I asked him, do you know any other French Sikhs in the area? And he actually pointed me in the direction of this lovely family that we found because he was friends with them when they did come to Grenoble, and he kind of helped them find their footing in the country when they first came here and helped them through all their challenges. So Atma introduced us to them, and their story was, we actually didn't know their story at all. Atma did not really tell us much besides they were a family that owned a restaurant. We thought, cool, French Sikhs that own a restaurant. That sounds great. And little did we know about all the terrible experiences that have shaped them into the amazing family they are today. And we actually learned that while making the film. So that's how we chose them.
How did hearing their story influence your personal thought on the turban ban? Did you think that influenced how you told the film?
Hearing the family's experience with the turban ban, each of their individual experiences definitely changed how I looked at the turban ban, because I had heard about it on the news, just from others. We learned about it in our Sikhlens courses, but hearing a personal account and hearing the pain that they felt and those stories, of the little boy being bullied for his turban, it gives you such a different outlook on it, because like I said, you can learn about it in school and you know that it's awful, but when you can put faces to those terrible experiences, and especially when you care about those people, it totally changed my outlook, and it made me angry, it made me sad. It really just honestly motivated me to make this film as best as it could be to change that stigma, both in America and across the world.
Haley, explain how you integrated the animation.
I didn't want the animation to suddenly show up in the film, so it was hard to find the right transition into it, but I always really liked the style of starting with a real-life scene and turning it into a drawing and making it come alive in 2D. But I was also originally going for a watercolor effect that would feel like a memory, since the children are recounting their past. Unfortunately, our budget was super limited, so we had to opt for a more simple style. It looks like the children themselves may have even drawn them, and we tried to use everything that they said in the interview to paint the memories for the audience.
What were some of the production challenges in making this film?
Since we were filming 2 films at once, there came a day where we had to split up and decide who went with who, which subject we were going to, and which group would get lucky and have our wonderful Professor Sally join. So Cassidy, Joe, and I took Uprooted, and Gianna, Nikki, and Sally went to Atma. It was super nerve-wracking not having Sally with us, plus having only the equipment we brought and making sure we captured everything we needed with enough battery life. I felt like we handled it, but I do wish Sally was there yelling at us to get more establishing shots. But our locations were also super tight quarters, since French architecture is very compact. So it was fun hiding from the camera in small corners, but also trying to get the artsy food shots we wanted without being able to fit a tripod in the kitchen was a challenge.
Rishabh, why did your team choose this subject for a film?
In the beginning, when we were researching subjects or people that were Sikh in France, we learned about this law that France government had passed, where you can't wear a religious attire or anything in public. And we knew that turban is really big for Sikh people. It's part of the body. And So we decided to go with the subject because this affected all the Sikh people in France, and not even Sikh people, even Muslims, Hindus, or Christians, everyone. Some of them could hide the religious symbols inside, but some people couldn't hide, and it is a part of their personality, it is part of themselves. And so we decided to see how this law had affected Sikh people and how the law came into power. So we decided to choose the subject.
Rishabh, why do you think Vivek and his family were able to adapt to a life in France and Sikh families in Paris continue to experience difficulties?
Well, Vivek came from a military background, so he had traveled the whole world with his father, and he knew about cultures of other countries. He knew how to adapt to a different place. And Vivek came in as a student. A lot of us, like Josh, me, Kashif, we all came in as immigrants, and somewhere we knew that we had to adapt because we were coming to a new country. The culture was different, and I think Vivek understood that. At the same time, he had a French wife. He fell in love with his wife, who was French. So she also, I think, helped him adapt to this. And I don't think he didn't have any issues. He had a lot of issues, but he was just good at tackling that. And he knew that to be in power, to make changes, he had to adapt to the French. And then once he's inside the French people's mind, once they consider him one, he can bring change. So I think that's why he was easily adapting to the French culture of French people. But it was hard for him too, I think.
Of the two films you made in France, which was the most challenging and why?
I think post-production wise, the Sardar of Kondesue was really challenging because we had to create a narrative out of just one interview. While turBAN, we had a lot of interviews, we had a lot of footage, and it was more emotional because we had a lot of emotional stories. So we knew that somewhere we can create emotion in that. But at the same time, turBAN was really hard to create a narrative because it was really hard. We didn't want to go the regular path of putting in the problem and then the solution, but we wanted to create a narrative where uh, the problem is not just affecting the Sikh people, but we learn that this is affecting a lot of other people. So, uh, turBAN was really hard to create a narrative, like how to create a narrative that grabs people, and it's also different from other films that you have seen before.
Again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to our keynote speakers, the Singh Twins, Dean Galloway from Chapman University, and young Chapman filmmakers who joined us for the Q&A. A special thanks to our Sikhlens donors and sponsors. Don't miss the great lineup for Saturday and Sunday online. Check out Sikhlens.com for our program or go directly to this channel during the weekend. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. There will be programs to watch all weekend long, and don't miss our Sikhlens virtual concert on Sunday starting at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is Sumita Batra, your host for Sikhlens 2020. Thank you so much.